You are listening to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, a podcast where three women discuss horror movies from the silent era through the 1970s. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, and Anchor. Timely, topical, terrifying. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls. And we have another movie that doesn't suck. Maybe not the best in the world, but it doesn't suck. And it is The Last Man on Earth, starring Vincent Price. It's a 1964 movie based on forgot the author's first name, but his last name is Mathison, and it was a short
Richard.
story.
Yeah.
Richard
Richard
Mathison,
Mathison. Mhm.
which was I Am Legend, was the short story. There's been, interestingly, a couple iterations of this. I think this was the first one, though.
I
And
think so.
then
Yeah.
A
Because
Mega Man happened in
mhm.
1971, I think.
It was later. That one had
Charlton
oh,
Heston.
thank
And
you.
then I Am Legend in 2007, starring Will Smith, happened as well. So I would say it's been a long time since I read the story. This one, Last Man on Earth, is the closest to the book, if I'm recalling correctly,
Yes. I've
or the
seen
story.
this one and the Mega Man, and Richard Matheson was responsible for the script writing for this one, at least in part. Part right through, he started to be like, I yeah, no, I'm not liking this. But he wanted the residuals, so he did keep a pen name on it. But if I remember correctly, someone else took over the latter part of the writing of the screenplay.
I know it had multiple writers. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if they had credited Richard Matheson because of the story, the short story, or because he had screenread it as well. So that's good to know. Thanks,
Look,
Rebecca.
the screenwriter Logan Swanson is
Yeah.
actually him.
Ah,
Yeah, he wanted the residuals.
I mean, it was his short story, Best Make
Justifiably
Bank.
so. Yes.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. So the quick synopsis, without going too nuts, is basically a virus that basically turns people into vampires after they die. Gets worldwide spread, and in this case, it's Robert Morgan as the character, though in the book it's Robert Neville, is the only one who survives that he knows of, completely uninflicted with the virus, well, with the disease, because we'll get back to whether or not this is a
Yeah.
virus or not in the movie, but with the disease. And so he's going around basically just surviving, like, because he doesn't know what else to do. So he's just surviving and killing every vampire he sees and just existing. And there's a lovely quote at the beginning of the movie where he says, "Another day to live through, best get started." And I don't think I've ever empathized with something so much in my entire. But
That
it's
did
also
sort of echo a little bit for me, though, too.
but yeah, it's really interesting too, because like these kind of movies hit different now after COVID, don't you think? Like the fact that he's like, it's 3 years, it's just been 3 years, and you're thinking, oh shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh shit, it's been 3 years. You know. Yeah, it holds a different weight because the first time I saw this movie, I was like, yeah, this is just kind of there. I'm not really too into it. This time watching the movie, I was like, okay, this hits different. It's much like I've said to people before, listening to The Stand by Stephen King is vastly different now than before the 2020 pandemic. So you get, I think, more of the story in this one, more of the sense of desperation, more of the sense of Jesus Christ, nobody knows anything,
Right.
which, yeah, as we know, sucks.
Yep, yeah. How do we cure it? How do we stop it? What do we do? The funny thing is, dear God, why isn't there a vaccine? And then you think about when there is one. Though, to be fair, the way they did the emergency vaccine for us was a little shady. They didn't release full details till, oh, what, about a month, 2 months ago? So, you know, to give people their due, they did have a right to be suspicious, and you should be cautious of an emergency use vaccine, but you also should weigh your options. And I still feel that it was best to take the vaccine, and I was happy to do it. But you
Yeah.
know, But that doesn't mean that people who felt suspicious of it were wrong. It's just perhaps taking her horse dewormer instead was not really the best idea either.
God's sakes, don't take horse dewormer. Don't. As the
Well,
person
and
who's seen
also,
things go through the FDA, for fuck's sake, don't.
I mean, to be clear, if you were denying it just because you were denying it is completely asinine. If you're denying it because you understood it was an emergency approved vaccine and all the research was not in yet, that makes a little more sense. But yeah, I judge you on one, the other. I think you're making a logical decision, but maybe you should think through it more. But the fun thing, so Rebecca, scientist wise, I know that you're not like a bacteriologist, but
No.
so did you think it was funny how like apparently this was a very protean thing where it was bacilli germ and it was a virus? Like he called it 4 or 5 different things throughout the movie.
Yeah,
I
they
don't know if you remember.
called it a germ. They called it a virus. I think they called it a bacterium at one point.
Mhm.
And I'm like, no, they're different. They're entirely different things. Pick one, pick one set of language and go with it. And I'm fine with that. I don't care what you call it.
Somebody just got excited and was just throwing every word there out at
Yeah.
it, and they just did not think it through. You're like, those are three
No,
distinct things that you're calling that.
It's the same beef I have when I watch any forensic crime show. When I'm yelling at the screen and going, you don't get results back like that. Or, that's not how that works. Yeah, so yeah, but and that's the occasional danger I run into when they try to be realistic, but they didn't do much of an effort. I almost wish just make up something. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess in my head, I thought, oh, they don't know what it is, so they just keep calling it something different because every time they look at it, they're like, it's a virus. No, it doesn't do what a virus does. It's a bacteria.
Yeah.
No,
I'm actually comfortable with that as well if they base it on that knowledge. No.
it's like,
No.
but I
From what
think they actually called it all of them in one scene, though.
They did.
Yeah. That's a good theory, Betsy. Yeah, like I feel like that wasn't the reason behind it because they kept acting as if whatever it was they were looking at was acting consistently. They just didn't know how to stop it. But yeah, the other thing that I thought was funny. So you have this one scientist that's like throwing the debate with Morgan about that it's vampirism, and Morgan is like, you could see the whatever it was supposed to be in here, so we know it's not. And I'm like, Ben, whose last name I forgot, that was the other scientist, kept arguing that like that doesn't exclude it. I'm like, wouldn't the logical answer be that maybe that the whatever you want to call it, I'm just going to go with germ for now. The germ was the cause of vampirism. Maybe it might have been the answer as opposed to excluding it. But the other funny thing is much later in the movie when he runs into a infected but not overrun woman who they
Right.
apparently somewhere found a vaccine-ish for it that allowed them to
Temporary
sustain
vaccine that allows them
sustained humanity at some level, but didn't actually cure or prevent the sickness. So that was a little interesting. Um, he said that the only thing he could think of as to why he was immune was because he was bit by a bat once in Panama when he was or something like that. Which I'm like,
sorry,
okay.
Did you hear me rolling my eyes from here when I watched that part? Because I'm pretty sure it was loud.
I mean, it was a bat that apparently had already had the germ and it filtered through the bat, and therefore it was a less potent version of it that went into his body, so his body was able to repel it. Was the whole not good science logic.
Yeah. The whole problem with the crazy disease, tropical diseases, is they do jump from animal to person, and then they go, if you'll excuse the phrase, batshit crazy once they hit our system.
Yeah. Well, also like the flashback scene where you had Ben with the newspaper article about European disease. Does it carry it on the wind? I mean, it was just kind of scarily and eerily all too familiar with the whole COVID
Yeah.
thing where like nobody really,
Knew how it
I
was
mean, we knew it wasn't
transmitted.
carried on the wind, but but
Does
it was
it,
like the weird
yeah,
news that we get.
it was like, is it like some diseases that will stay in the air there for any number of hours? Does it settle right away? We're not sure. Because there are plenty that like once an infected person goes in that room, you know, it's that virus will be active for a good 8 hours. Or, but and
Some
unfortunately I
die in
didn't
the
remember
air.
which one. I want to say it's measles, but I could be wrong because I remember it being mentioned on a podcast.
Yeah, and there's some that only last minutes once it gets airborne, so it just
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
varies a lot. But yeah.
Yeah, but that whole period at the beginning of 2020, once, in the first quarter in March, once the shutdown started rolling around, because nobody knew. And after living through that, the flashback scenes, I think, are more tense than the scenes with the vampires or whatever they are.
Oh, I
Absolutely.
agree. The whole little kid's birthday party, and then you see the
Mm.
empty yard afterwards, and yeah. So this is me just being heartless, right? But the scene where the little girl goes blind and she's like, "Mommy, Mommy, where are you?" And the mom's just kind of sitting there not saying anything. I'm like, what the fuck is
Yeah.
wrong? Like, doesn't reach out her hand for a kid or anything, doesn't say,
Yeah.
"I'm here,
Do
baby." They
not, like,
just keep,
take your child's hand or put your hand on their face in a comforting gesture.
It's
and what was
okay.
the
I'm
mosquito net
here.
supposed to accomplish?
I
These are
don't
all things
know.
I wonder. But yeah, exactly, Betsy. Like, how do you not say it's okay, I'm here, or anything like that to your child?
I'm thinking of a use for the mosquito net. Uh, I haven't thought of one yet, but I'm thinking of very silly stuff like it's going to keep the vampires out. Um,
Maybe they thought it was a
It's transmitted by
mosquito-borne
mosquitoes.
disease, like malaria or something.
But it was interesting. They had no qualms about being in the room with the sick child. And even at one point, he was like, I don't think you should send her to school today. I'm thinking, at what point do you ever send a sick child to school? Like,
My
like be
mom can
damned.
answer that one. She's like, parents do it all the time.
But it's dumb.
Yeah,
Well,
I
okay, let
agree.
me be clear. This was clearly a woman that was a stay-at-home mom.
Exactly.
right.
So I
Yeah.
understand, like, it's not great, but I understand when you can't afford daycare, you can't take off
Oh,
work, your kid's able to function, you're like, go to school.
yeah.
I need the
This,
nurse to call and say that you need to get sent home, otherwise they'll fire. But like it's a little bit of a different scenario. It's a shitty one, but it happens. But
yeah.
you're looking at a stay-at-home mom, so like, why would
Oh,
you
big
send your
time.
sick kid to school? It's
Good
weird.
question.
It was all very weird. But yeah,
Yeah.
but that little actress, she was trying to act her heart out, and I just thought it was so funny. It
I
shouldn't have been.
yeah, I should have looked up more of her, of the young girl, just to see what else she had been in.
Well, feel free to talk amongst yourself, and I'll Google.
I that was my comment about it. I see
But yeah,
Betsy look
she
that up
was
too.
cute little girl, and she seemed to be having a good old time, and she was really acting her little self out with that. And it was Christy Cortland was the actress's name. She played Kathy Morgan. And let's see if she was in anything else. It doesn't look like she was.
I was
Huh.
gonna say I didn't see anything else.
That seems to be her one and done,
Who
which is interesting.
knows? Yeah. One thing I liked at the party, how they were showing Price's character going out around with the camera. I swear to God, I read something from his daughter that he was like that, pictures taking in this, because he was trying to give her a normal childhood.
Hmm. Yeah, she's quoted stuff like that he took pictures of everything, and she used to, and often her mom, even after her and Vincent split up, would also take pictures of him with Victoria as well, so that they would be normal and have pictures together and doing things and stuff. So yeah. Apparently not a great husband, but it seems he was a decent dad.
Yes. He may have been a bit of a philanderer.
Shock.
I mean, yeah, and I'm not really surprised. It's Hollywood. It's what they do. So,
Hollywood, it's Vincent Price. I mean,
yes, I am sure he was quite popular.
But interestingly, Romero credits this movie as sort of a blueprint for Night of the Living Dead, and you could definitely see that with the way the vampires are moving
Yeah.
around and stuff like that.
Yeah, because when I'm looking at them at first, I'm like, well, this makes me more think zombies. You know, Romero zombies, not fast run zombies.
right.
So I can definitely see where he took it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, because they're vampires, but they're not vampires like we think of vampires where they're like slick and, romantic. They're
They're not
somewhere in
Dracula.
between that and a zombie somewhere.
Yeah,
A
middle.
ghoul would be a good word, I guess, for them,
Cool.
right?
Yeah.
I think that's a
Yeah.
better word for it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rudimentary speaking skills, able to use rudimentary tools, but not really able to logic things out very well.
No, no. And then the whole like the fact that they're repelled by garlic, by their own reflection, like that kind of stuff is just kind of funny. It's not that they can't be seen in a mirror like Dracula supposedly can't or a vampire supposedly can, but they just don't like to look at themselves, which I thought was kind of funny. It's like, oh God, oh man, I look like awful.
Yeah.
Oh.
You know,
I'm like, shit, I guess I'm a ghoul because I'm like that. I'm like, oh, mirror, camera.
yeah,
No.
Jesus, I've seen myself in the mirror sometimes in the morning. I'm like, oh, you know. There's times
Oh,
where I'm
well.
sitting in the hairdresser's chair. I'm like, I don't necessarily want to look in the mirror right now.
Oh yeah.
That's almost the worst because the lighting's so bad and they put that caper out. Yeah, no.
I think
Yeah,
sometimes
I'm curious in this movie as to where the mirror that how they don't like to see themselves in mirrors, what the logic for that one is. It's been a long time since I've read the book. In the original, in Dracula slash movie, and I don't remember if they address it in the book. It's been a long time since I've read it. At least not being able to be photographed, and mirrors used to be backed with a silver alloy. So there's that whole, oh, they don't like silver, which also got co-opted for the werewolf stuff, but this one just doesn't seem to have any sense.
no.
No, they almost make it more like a vanity thing where they just can't bear to see them as they themselves as they are, as opposed to, like any kind of actual like, oh my God, I'm ugly. It's I don't know, like maybe they have well,
I think,
much like we all do, one vision of what you think you look like, and then once confronted by the mirror, they realize they're undead creatures. I don't know. There was never explained, nor
yeah,
that why garlic was repulsive to them as well is not
yeah,
explained.
I
Right.
may go back to the book and see if there's anything mentioned in that, just out of sheer curiosity. But
Yeah.
I think
I remember it not being a very engaging short story, though,
it was
honestly.
not. It was not. It was misogynistic all to hell, and I couldn't stand it.
Yeah. And another interesting funny point, if I recall correctly, Rebecca, you might need to keep me honest if you remember. The
Sure.
main character in it was not a scientist. He was just a dude that like found a chemistry set when he was scavenging around the city and just started
You're correct.
experimenting.
Yes, you're
So
correct. He was like a plant worker or something like that.
yeah.
Your average Joe.
Yeah. So
I mean, I at
I
least
do like
appreciate the change. That
I
change.
yeah,
do. Yes.
it was a better change. I think it made more sense than just somebody sitting there with like test tubes going, let me see if I can cure the world. Which I don't think in the movie I Am Legend they address that at all, do they?
It's been
I
so
don't think
long since I.
it's been a while, but I don't think Will Smith is trying to cure anything. I think he's just surviving with his dog, and which of course ends up dying. Which I
Yeah.
wonder if they added the dog in because in this movie they had a dog, and which I thought was the most emotionally adorable scene.
Oh, it was. It was such a little cutie when he's trying to get the dog to come to him, because you can imagine how, after 3 years of no other person, when suddenly you see a furry person there, you're gonna be excited.
And I think Vincent Price really liked dogs to boot, so that probably added to it.
Yeah, he was
Probably.
a wonderful person.
Yeah.
I did think that the opening sequence with him like alone, doing all the things that he does on his own, doing like the habits of the day, like you go out, you check the generators, you make sure this is this, you make sure this is this. That like structure that you see in that, I thought was really effective. It really like painted that this has been 3 years of him doing this, going out every day, making sure this is this, making sure this is this, checking his inventory. What do I need today? And then once it's daylight, going out and doing whatever he needs to do once it's daylight because they're not out during the day. I thought that part was really, really effective and affecting so that when you get to the point where you're seeing like his past, where there were people and that he had like a family and whatever, it made it a little more meaningful. Like, oh, he lost a lot. Like this is not a man who was used to living on his own, or a loner or whatever. This was a man who had a job. This was a man who had a family, who had an active life, and now he has nothing. And I think that was very effective. That they gave you that like literally pretty much a full day of just following him around and just him kind of talking to himself in his mind and doing things all day before we started to see what life was like for him now and what was going on. I thought that was really effective. And before we
I
started the
agree.
flashbacks.
Well, and to add to it, like Vincent Price wanted it to the gruelingness of it to really be hit home. So the bodies you see him pick up and stick into his car in that opening scene, they actually were actors and actresses that he picked up, and that's why he's actually very careful putting them in and stuff and doesn't toss them. The ones that he throws into the pit, those are dummies for obvious reasons. He's not going to throw a live
Right.
actor. But so you can see the struggle to pick up the body, put it in there. He wanted Vincent Price wanted that in there, so you get a little more authenticity to like the grillingness of it. And yeah,
Yeah,
I
this
mean,
is
like
not
even
a
ticking off the
convenient
days
life.
on the calendar and
Yeah.
I think he did a good job with that aspect of it because it
Oh,
was very
absolutely.
even in the beginning too. A little bit, I'm like, this is just kind of dragging a bit here.
And that's but I think in this instance where usually I'm like, I don't need it to plod like this. I kind of need it to plod like this because I felt every minute of how long those days are when you have no one to talk to and nothing to do except these simple things that you always do. It's the same thing every day. I totally felt that. So then when he started to like watch the videos of his family, I'm like, that totally makes sense. You would want to do that. You would want to break up this monotony. You would have to because the fact that he wasn't just drunk the whole time is amazing to
Yeah,
me.
I know that's
yeah,
where I'd be after a while.
I'm not cut off for surviving an apocalypse. I pointed this out to several people who are like, don't you want? I'm like, I do not want to live through it. I don't. I don't want to struggle. I don't want that grueling day in and day out. I don't want that optimistic hope that something's going to happen and know that like, so this is another thing that they like kind of hits home with me that probably I'm sure hits home with you ladies as well. So when Ruth shows up and she's running from him and he's like, why run from me? Do you want to, suffer them? And I'm like, only a man would not understand why she
Yeah,
would also run from a human man as well
yeah,
as anything else.
I had
Like,
that same thought. Same
like
thought.
at least I know what they're after. You, I don't know when you're going to strike, right? I mean, like,
Yeah,
you
That's
know,
it. They're mindless and they may do things to me, but what you could do to me could destroy me utterly. And it has literally nothing to do with killing me.
yeah, whole other threat there. Vincent Price and the character he's playing, and probably actually Vincent Price himself. Like, no awareness of why this woman might be like,
yeah.
I'm gonna
Any
run.
any woman watching this understands that scene.
Absolutely.
And yeah, everyone does.
It's like,
Yep.
it's like this meme that I keep seeing on Facebook that I almost share every time I see it, where it's like, guy says, if men weren't around, who would protect you? And the woman replies, protect us from
From
what?
whom? Yeah. Hmm.
From other men?
Yeah.
You'd be gone. Anything
Yeah.
else?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It just it, I thought that was very, very effective and affecting in the Was it a little boring? Yeah, it was a little boring to watch.
A little
But
bit, but
also,
maybe that's the point.
yeah, it's
Exactly.
important. It's important to show how boring it is, how monotonous it is. And yeah, I'm with you, Jenny. I also don't intend to live if there is an apocalypse.
I
We're gonna
apparently
find like,
do based on the anxiety dreams that I have about it.
I mean, the truth is I could, I just don't want to. I'm gonna have a big old party and then I don't know, stick a bullet in my head. I don't know. But I mean, maybe run out and join the zombies, whatever. I'll be dead. I don't care. Like, just if there's gonna be a nuclear waste, just put me at ground zero. I don't want a slow radiating death. No, thank
Well,
you.
yeah, if that's the case, I would prefer to be one of the ones vaporized immediately.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
I'm not
much.
about it. I
I do
just
not I do not wish to be a dead person walking.
No.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Or just badly maimed? No, thank you. In horrible pain? No, thanks. No.
Well, I mean, if you do survive, then you got to worry about the other survivors. Every show shows it to you, and it's probably sad. Well, hell, COVID proved it to us. People fighting over toilet paper. I
Yeah.
mean, no, I don't want to. I don't want to have to worry about shooting people that are coming in to get food. I don't.
Yeah, and by the same token, you also had people like, "Hey, I'm gonna put my artwork up online. I'm gonna perform online, et cetera.
There
Tune
were
in."
lovely people, yes. Yeah,
And
I
you
won't say that
had
everybody reacted that
the
way, but
cooperative, yeah, you had the cooperative reactions, but yeah, you also had the people that are like, "I'm gonna buy all the toilet paper." Like, how much are you gonna go through in a month? Come on, you don't need a
And I will say
truckload.
that is like one thing that I think sets this movie apart from like the big COVID thing was that we were still able to connect. Like we were still able to connect because we have internet, we have whatever. And I know he had the band radio, but a band radio is really only as good as other radios
Yes,
having the capability to reach you and to
and
reach
respond.
out. So, it could just be that every time he turned it on, there was somebody 20 blocks away who didn't have theirs on at that time. They chose theirs at a different time. Like they could have just missed each other. But with the internet running, all the time, we always had access to people. And that's, I think in that way, setting it when they did, of course, it was actually set in the time that it was, but setting it when they did and not like, I can only imagine that I Am Legend is a little bit different because it would be way easier they would have to take down the whole grid in order to take down our ability to find each other, which
yeah, and that's kind of what happened to the 2007 movie. I assume is what you're referring to.
I've never seen it. So
Yeah,
I know it, but I never watched it. I
yeah, it was
saw
a
this one
complete
and I was like, this
apocalyptic
looks good.
breakdown. So yeah, the internet wasn't really there, nothing like that. Cell phones, cell servers, towers, all that stuff. So, which I mean, all require energy and electricity. So if it's not being kept up, then it's not
Right.
happening.
And it's not
So
happening.
yeah, individual generators will only do so much.
So long. Yeah. And one thing I thought which emphasized that isolation in the movie was the scene where they hear the neighbor screaming over her.
Husband, I
I'm not
believe.
sure if her husband. Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure if it was her husband's or somebody else's body in her family being taken away for cremation, and she's freaking out and let me bury him. And it's very much the like how you kind of watch chaos from behind your window shade. You watch, but you don't get involved.
Yeah. Well, and
There,
also in the same sense, like even though we were connected, we were isolated in the sense where like, Columbus didn't have more trucks or anything like that.
yeah,
I mean, there was a lot of people died and probably are still dying, but we didn't have freezer trucks in the street. New York, LA, places like that did. So
Mhm.
imagine the impact if you looked out your window and saw that, and then you watch this movie and you see
Right.
them loading bodies into a truck to throw them into a fiery pit, quite literally.
Right.
It's a whole different, I would
That's a
assume,
very
impact.
different feeling. Yeah. A
Yeah, I'd
totally
be
different.
interested in hearing somebody's reactions to that part or experience within the last pandemic.
I mean, I imagine it's got to be quite triggering, but I could be wrong. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, there were moments of this that I was like, ooh.
Mhm. Well, part of me is like torn. Like the whole scene. So like the whole time, Morgan, Vincent Price's character, well, his daughter's sick. He's telling his wife, "Don't call a doctor. Don't call a doctor." Which is interesting because the "don't call a doctor" was because he knew that they were going to throw the girl in the pit and they couldn't do anything for their little girl. Like there was nothing they could do for her.
Yeah.
Like apparently that's like 100% fatality when it comes to this particular whatever it was. Um,
Right.
so you caught it, you died, period, end of story, as far as they knew. And then the doctor just apparently reported the case to the authorities and they loaded, the body up and tossed it in a pit. But you know what I was curious about? Like, did they actually wait for them to die? I'm assuming they did because there was no struggling corpses in the
Yeah.
truck, but it's something to wonder about. Or did they just take it away and wrap it up and throw it? You know what I mean? Or did they kill
Right.
them and throw them in the pit? Like it's very questionable about what actually happened. Like I don't think they really drove that point home. I think they just made it seem like that Morgan was just afraid because he didn't want her to get thrown in the pit. And maybe that's all it was, but my brain took a lot of dark turns. Like, you
Right.
know,
I did not go there as much because based on the time period that this movie was set, that they wouldn't have brought those sort of themes in.
I just,
Um,
like you're probably right, but all I can think of is why would a scientist refuse a doctor? You know what I mean? It's like
I
the
look
step
at
one or
it
step two.
as he knew they couldn't do anything, and possibly, I don't know if he was thinking of risk of outside infection as a reflex.
I doubt it
Um,
because, like I said, they weren't isolating themselves from that child, and he was going to work.
yeah.
So, I
I mean, that's true.
literally, yeah. I mean, you're probably right. It was probably literally that he was trying to avoid his daughter being thrown into the pit, but it just seemed interesting.
Mhm.
Like there's a whole other set of things that could go wrong because I mean,
Yeah.
although the 60s may seem really innocent on paper, there was a lot of crazy shit going on behind the scenes, especially in the
Yeah.
50s into the
Oh yeah.
60s when we think about the experiments they were doing on women in Puerto Rico with hormone birth control
Mhm.
pills, a whole bunch of other shit that led into that. Yeah. So germ
I will say
warfare
that
was
there
kind of a
was a
thing.
I will say that there was a hint at Catholicism because he goes into the church and he lights the candles and whatever. And they do have a big thing about like if you're not buried in a graveyard, then you don't go to heaven. So it's entirely possible that his whole thing was just he didn't want his child to go to a pit because the child wouldn't it's not consecrated ground.
Wouldn't be
And his
consecrated
Yeah.
child
ground.
It's
would
very
go to hell.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it is relatively recent that they approved
Cremation even.
cremation, and even though they approved it for a while, I'm sure were still a lot of lingering thoughts on
There
it.
are still
Lingering.
there are still people who will not be cremated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um because of
Oh,
that reason. So that
That's
was
true.
in my head what I thought it was literally the burial because they had just had that scene where he went into the like crypt and he was lighting the candles and he was kind of it appeared that he was doing some kind of
Wait,
prayer.
oh, you realize he buried his wife in the crypt, right?
Well, yes, I know he buried her there, but he was also like lighting candles and like
He was doing the
it was-
ritual as well, yeah.
mhm.
yeah. So
Though at
I
first he tried to bury her in unconsecrated ground, though. But still, it could be more of the taboo against cremation that was
Mhm.
going on in Catholicism at the time as well. So that could be it, as opposed to just hallowed ground. But yeah. But didn't it hit you hard though? You had that MP when he stopped him from trying to grab the bodies that were being thrown in the pit. The MP was like,
Oh
"Lots of
yeah.
people's daughters are in there, including my own."
Yes. Yeah.
that was very
That was a
effective.
hell of a line to put that in there.
That was very effective. Very
Mhm.
effective. I mean, honestly, this was a really good film. Like it had
I don't know if I'd call it really good, but I thought
well,
it was well done.
it was an interesting film and it had moments of great poignancy. Great poignancy.
Well, I mean, it was an Italian-made film and it was low budget. And when you think about that and putting into it, I think it actually, given all the restrictions and what they did, I think it really was really good. Was it like Academy Award great? No, but given what they had and what they work with, I thought that they really drove the story well. And where it dragged, it was supposed to drag because you were supposed to feel that mundaneness, that just judging, grueling,
Endless
just
sameness.
survival to survive.
Yeah.
Which, I do say that I didn't want to survive, but I also know I have a really weird obstinate streak that might kick in where I'll be like, fuck it, I'm going to be the last man standing just because there's something wrong in my brain. That could actually happen. I hope it doesn't because I don't want it. But you know, that's a thing where they knock you down and you keep getting up even though you're in great pain, or if you're in the Breakfast Club and they keep getting attention, say one more word, and you keep saying one more word because you just can't stop yourself. That runs very strong in my family. Some people have the force, we have this. It's not good. Um, I blame my grandma. It's probably why she's still alive in 94. But
Is it the mean one that made it so like
yes.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, the
Okay.
nice one died at 89. The mean one's still going. But yeah, so but I mean it is really interesting how they do it and how they drive it and how it keeps going. And yes, a lot of it's goofy and B movie, definitely, but I'd still say it's a good film. And of the three iterations, including this one, I think it's in a lot of ways the best.
Yeah, I given a choice between the three of them, this is the one I would choose.
And I
Yeah,
think part of that is the charm of
Vincent Price, for
Vincent
sure.
Price. Like I could follow him.
No, I mean, come on, you know.
I'll
So he
follow him
couldn't say
around all the
scream and
time.
scream again, almost anything else he could.
Scream and Scream Again doesn't count. We got 5 minutes of him, and the best part was him falling into a pit of acid. So
Yeah.
it doesn't
Fair.
count. Count.
Doesn't count, right? But yeah. But you know, I don't. So the end was fascinating, which I is kind of true to the book in a lot of ways. Or the story. It was.
Yes, it
It's
is.
really not a book. It's a short story. It was in a collection of short stories. They probably have separated as book now, but it was originally
It's
just
more
a
of a
group of
novella,
five.
you know, than
Yeah.
anything else.
Um. But so you know, Ruth ends up being like a Matahari, and she's there to spy on him and find out what he knows. And turns out he knows nothing because nobody's fucking talking to him, right? And here this whole society developed where the infected with this, which I thought this was funny, the vaccine laced with blood to feed the whatever it was is what the blood was for. The vaccine was to keep it confined. This seems not quite scientifically logical to me, but okay.
Movie
Yeah,
magic. It's movie
there we
magic.
go. It's fine. It's a bloody vaccine. I don't anyway. But so they function. They still don't really like the sunlight, but they clearly can be out in it because Ruth was. They prefer to function at night, judging by the fact that that's when they were coming after him. Whereas if the easy attack would just be to ambush him in the daylight, but because he wouldn't be expecting that. But clearly they function better at night. They're rebuilding society. I love how basically, you know, Morgan accuses Ruth of being a terrible person because they plan on killing him because he's a monster to them because he just
Mhm.
kills anything that isn't him because he doesn't know that as far as he's concerned they're all infected and dead that he's finding in their
Right.
sleep, right?
Yeah,
And
it's that's the Twilight Zone twist. No.
it turns out he's killing people too,
Mhm.
you know.
Yep.
Um, but he's like, so you can kill me to start your charming little how charming your society is going to be or something like that. And she's like, no society is charming at its start. That's what Ruth tells him, something along those lines, which when you think about it,
It's accurate.
yeah, I mean, depending on what you mean by society, I guess
Mhm.
civilizations itself don't usually have a charming start, do they? It's usually war torn and bloody and fraught with peril and just it because people suck. It'd be great if there was like a society that started where it was just like, a commune. I don't know, something where it's just people wanting to band together and not be dicks. That'd be lovely. But history shows that dicks ruin everything.
See, and usually those are cults. Aw.
So yeah. But yeah, so it basically just which so the other thing I want to point out is they don't explain to you why they're burning these bodies at first. They hint at it a little because at one point Ben says something about the dead coming back to life, and Morgan's like, "Oh, that's just rumor. No one's ever seen the case." But they're burning these bodies, and it's not unusual. I mean, that's something they'll do during plagues and stuff like that. Well, they'll bury them in communal pits. They just make sure that the bodies aren't there to spread more disease. They don't necessarily burn them all the time, but in this case, they're specifically throwing them in a pit and setting them on fire. And they're
Yeah.
basically keeping a continual fire going. And like I said, it's not crazy thing outside of anything. Like it's not really that shocking when you think about the situation, but it was really specific that that's what they were doing. And then Morgan's wife dies, which was funny because you have this long drawn out death with the child, but Morgan's wife suddenly is just like, I'm dead. You know,
I'm
like,
dead.
I'm
that was
fine.
it.
I'm dead.
Boom. You know, whereas
Yeah.
the child had enough time to be like, mommy, I can't see you, mom. Um, but not Verge. Verge just died. She turned blind and died. But I mean, you knew she was sick to begin with because she had that little thing where she was like stomach cramps or something, and then was sleepy, and but then all of a sudden she was blind. She was dead. Oh, that was it. So he, of course, is not going to let his wife get taken by these people. He buries her, and then you understand why it's not working because she comes back, is knocking on the door, looking rather ragged, droopy eyed, and all like something had already started eating her on the ground. And his solution is to, which this seems a very bad solution to me. I'm thinking staking her and burning her would have been the kinder thing to do, as opposed to trapping her in a vault
Yes.
for
Yeah.
eternity.
You would
Yeah.
think.
My claustrophobia gives me lots of nightmares about that.
Because, think about it. He's dead. She's still there.
Going more and more mad.
This seems a horrible fate to me. For the record, this kind of thing happens. I'm already dead. Feel free to stay. If I'm a functioning vampire like Ruth and her people, leave me alone. But if I'm like the Ben type where I'm just like, my God,
If you're
feel
like
free to stake me and burn me.
if you're like the Romero zombie-esque, yeah, I'm done. Do what you must.
It's okay. I forgive you in advance. But yeah, no. So, but in the end, he's the monster. They decide they need to destroy him along with the other dead vampires, for lack of a better distinction, to restart society. And so they do. They chase him around the city. Ruth tries to save him. Oh, important plot point. Of course, his blood having the weakened virus that caused immunity, or the weakened whatever that caused immunity from the bat bite. I assume what he was doing was giving a transfusion of his blood into Ruth,
Yes, that was
and
my understanding.
thereby curing her of her vampirism. Though I'm not really sure what getting bit by Ben would do to her then. Does it reinfect, or is she already proof against it? I guess she'd be proof against it already,
She'd be
right?
proof against it, I guess.
Yeah. So, which that was a whole stupid scene. That scene could have just been gone. It made no sense. Like, she didn't scream until after he's biting her. What's happening? Was she running out the door? I don't know. It was very weird. But at any rate, he cures her. She's like, "You need to run." The goon squad shows up and starts hunting him down. He puts up a nice little battle, though I don't really know why he just chose tear gas instead of bullets, but whatever. Gets into the church, runs around the altar a couple times, gets shot dead, calls them freaks before he dies because,
Yeah.
which is kind of true in a lot of sense to the way the short story went, because Matheson was apparently a dick and his character followed through with that. Misogynistic dick. You're all freaks. I'm a real man.
Oh, and also, this isn't really germane to the movie, but in the book, in the beginning, he's like, the character is constantly talking about seeing women out there. And like how his hips just jerk toward them. I'm like, what the fuck am I reading? At that point, I almost kind of threw the book across the room. I thought about it. I probably should have. So yeah, save yourself, don't. I mean, yes,
Eh,
it's a literature point, I suppose, for the book, but to read my famous author, blah blah blah. It's not something I would read again.
yeah, I was not compelled to try to read the story again because I couldn't remember enough details as to why it was revolting, but I just remembered things were revolting in it. But yeah. So at any rate, they shoot him dead, and Ruth tells the little baby to stop crying. She doesn't need to be scared anymore. Because basically their monster's dead. Which, by the way, though, the dead vampires appeared very useless. I mean, he gets swarmed by him, he like Morgan does when he's still alive, because he fell asleep in his wife's crypt and didn't realize the time had passed. And he just basically is like picking them up and moving them aside. So they're not super effective villains, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They were not.
But
You're correct.
But you know, if you want to go for a triple threat, um, I do find comparisons fun. So like I did rewatch a Mega Man after I watched
Mhm.
Last Man on Earth. Last Man on Earth is far superior. Um, and it's not like, I mean, Vincent Price is always going to be my favorite. Charlton Heston, though, like when he decides to act or when he decided to act, he's dead, obviously. He did great, and I do feel that he did well in this role. But there's definitely a skeezy scene where he goes to molest a mannequin. Um, but I will also give that like what is sort of the Ruth character in Omega Man is played by an African American woman, and it's a very strong female lead. She's badass. She knows how to
Mhm.
use a gun. Of course, in the end, she becomes part of the family, and it gets a little weird there. But I mean, but for the most part, she's a leader. She's able to defend herself. She's not a Matahari. She's she's pretty tough, and it's pretty awesome. And she's like a leader of what's left of humanity on her own right. So that part was kind of fun. But the rest of it was very weird. Like the weird vampirism, like they were still cognizant. The infected were, even though they were dead in Omega Man, and they were Luddites, anti-tech basically. They were blaming scientists and technology for the end of the world. And basically in this case it was germ warfare. There was a war between Russia and China that caused it to happen. So it's an interesting plot. Um in that sense, it's not the greatest story. There is quite a bit of like misogyny and some funny parts of it too, like the in this case it's Neville, not Morgan,
Mhm.
that Charlton Heston plays. He openly admits he's like, well, I'm a narcissist because he has a screen that basically he can turn on so he can watch himself in his own house. And it's just funny. And like the female character just looks at him and she goes, well, hello there. So there's a lot of funny things about it. Actually, Charlton Heston watching a movie that's basically a documentary of Woodstock is freaking hilarious on so many levels. Um, so, and then I haven't rewatched I Am Legend, but if you want to watch all three and do comparison, I think it's always worthwhile in a way, just so you can see the evolution and how they update things from, well, in this case, like what, 64 to 71, so like 7 years.
Mhm.
And then, 71 to 2007, so
Yeah.
6 years.
That one's a good jump. Yeah, jump.
So, I mean, it's fun, but all in all, though, I still say, is it really a horror movie? Not in traditional sense. There's nothing that really scares you in it.
Entirely.
I mean,
Um,
I'd say maybe more science fiction horror.
Yeah,
yeah.
a little bit of a psychological horror if you think about the
Yeah.
mundaneness of
Mhm.
I was
trudging
gonna say
on day after day.
Yeah.
trudging on day after day, that's psychological. Yeah, because like the vampire, zombie, whatever the hell they were, the ghouls, they're not scary. They're
No.
they're ineffectual at best. Um, it- they knock on doors a lot. They
You
yell
never
his
really got
name.
you never really got a sense of menace of them.
No,
No.
even when they were like yelling his name, I thought that was really like it would really get on you. Like I can imagine like if there was just somebody outside of my house all the time going, Betsy, Betsy, Betsy,
Oh yeah.
Betsy, I would get really annoyed, but I would
Yeah.
have killed him a long time ago. That is not the fact that he didn't stake that man is a tribute to him.
That one's
Well,
on
and
I
him.
don't
actually,
understand.
it made no sense that he didn't. Maybe he was just nostalgic because that was his good friend Ben. But
Right.
I don't know. It was weird.
Because
Like,
he just kept saying his name over and over and over for nights and nights and nights on end. If he's been doing that the whole time, oh no. Oh no. He would have been dead within like 2 days.
I think the logic was supposed to be that he wanted to find the nest, but it's like, what is the point? You could just kill these people in. I mean, he tried to say that the swarm of them was what would overwhelm him, but you could see him getting swarmed by them. He still got through. Like he probably could have staked three of
Yeah.
them before he went in the house. Yeah, it was
Agreed.
weird. I don't know. I didn't really.
Yeah, I didn't there were a lot of things about that dynamic that I didn't 100% understand.
Mhm.
Um, but again, this isn't a perfect film. It's an entertaining film. It's it's just not like it there are definitely things that I'm like you could see that they were on a shoestring budget. It was obviously a product of 1960 whatever and
Mhm.
but
They clearly didn't know the difference between bacteria germs and viruses, or that there was a difference between the
Yeah.
three, actually, more to the point. There were some weird snafus where you'd watch and you can see that his car would change from a Chevy to a Ford. Um,
That's fun. I missed that.
I'm gonna
prior
have to
to
go
his
back and
Chevy
check
being
now.
completely destroyed and him getting a new car, but yeah. There's a lot of weird things if you watch closely where the steering wheel changes sides. Um,
I did
but
catch that actually.
so which is something that only like picky people that stare and watch things too much. Does it kill the movie? No, it just entertains you if you're like me and you're like
I was gonna say, once I learn stuff like that, then I just watch for it. Like, oh, there it is.
there it
Okay.
is. Yeah, like movie trivia stuff. You just want to see it. Like, oh, there it is. Like when they tell you there's a hanging man in the Wizard of Oz, you'll keep rewatching that scene to see if you can see the shadow. You know,
Or
where's
the,
that at?
or the ambulance in Glory.
Yeah. So, which there's more to that too. Like in these, like I think if you watch closely, I read some trivia where supposedly you can see people walking around in the daylight, like behind a fence or here and there, or a car driving in the background when they shot scenes. But obviously they were probably shooting around some city in Italy, which I forgot which one it was. And actually the mushroom thing behind me is iconic of the area, which I think it closed down for a while, and then they renovated it and opened it up again in 2014. So
Mhm.
if you ever want to do on a weird movie trivia tour, you can go see the mushroom building. It's behind me.
The restaurant.
Yeah, there you go. So there's that. There's no Vincent Price there though, sadly.
No.
Sad enough.
But yeah, I mean, pretty well acted. Um,
There was nobody stuck out as being like, oh my God, that was an awful performance. So some of them I was like, it had to be annoying for that poor guy to be like, Morgan, Morgan all the time. I can imagine. But he did a really good job of being brainless. So good on you, dude.
but even like being excitable too.
Yeah.
So that actor's name was Giacomo Rossi Stewart. So obviously the Italian crew there. And the character's full name was Ben Portman. I kept forgetting his last name, sorry. But he was supposed to be a scientist too. And it's just funny because the way he played it, the whole like excitability thing, and like is it carried on the wind and is it vampires and stuff? Boy, does he not really sound like conspiracy theorists of today's age, right? Like he
Right.
just had that down.
Yeah.
And he wasn't completely wrong. He wasn't right, but he wasn't completely wrong.
Yeah,
But
Right.
like one of the last scenes where he's not the brainless dead, you know, Morgan goes and knocks on Ben's door, and there's like a circle of garlic and a mirror there, which is something that got adopted by Morgan after the fact because it was effective against the
yeah,
creatures after they came back.
works.
Um, but yeah, it's funny because Morgan's like, I think he said, "What is something wrong or something wrong with you?" And Ben answers, "No," and I plan on keeping it that way, and shuts the door in his face, which
I,
wasn't
during the
wrong.
during the pandemic, I wouldn't have even opened the door.
Right.
So didn't save him anyway, but
Nope.
and you never got an answer. Like you don't know how it was, if it was airborne, how it was being transmitted. And the funny
No.
thing is, though, with all the dead, like they don't really explain how it went from them kind of sort of keeping tabs on it by burning everything to everybody being infected and dead. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because at the point when Ben has the garlic and the mirror on his door, there is no Walking Dead around that you know of. It was still just the theory that somebody had heard. So that's I guess it's not necessary, but I just kind of wondered. And that's actually what they did better in a Mega Man, whereas they made it very clear that it hit hard and it was almost people were dying almost instantaneously. So it was harder for them to keep tabs on it. It wasn't this so
Well,
easy for
yeah,
health and stuff.
yeah.
So
That
but
makes
yeah,
sense. That honestly makes more sense to me that it would have been like super, super fast. Like just took out everybody in like one foul swoop. That makes a little bit more sense to me than this, where it seemed like it kept going on and on and on, and they had time to do
But
like testing and
yeah,
things
something
like
with the
that.
speed of cholera versus the flu.
Yeah.
though I mean in a sense, if you do really think about it, given COVID as a filter, it could have been a thing where like everything got overwhelmed and they just couldn't keep up, and that's when it
Right.
finally hit. but like it's not really clear in the movie. Like it just seems it goes from like slow to done, you know?
Right.
So I mean it could have been the case the hospitals got overwhelmed and the MPs that were taking care of the bodies got overwrought, and then that was it. But it's just not real obvious what happened there.
No.
But I mean,
Yeah.
not hard to conjecture, obviously. But
I was gonna say we were able to
Yeah,
get it kind of through conjecture, so
yeah,
but
I don't think they necessarily needed to outline everything for that part.
no, but they
Um,
could have put it like an intermediate scene where you just see like some of the MPs going or something like that, or even just the dead bodies of the MPs, which, well, I guess, well, technically Morgan was cleaning up after them after everybody died, so I guess you wouldn't see it
that's true.
right.
since he kept intending to pick up all the
Mhm.
bodies and throw them in the pit. Except his wife, who wanted to keep trapped in a.
Oh,
So
that's awful.
I'll have nightmares about it. That's the horror part. That's the only horror in the movie. That poor woman trapped in that fucking
Oh
ever.
God, I have to get an MRI in 3 weeks. Uh,
Mm.
thinking of being trapped in a small area.
Yeah, but you could crawl out. You'll be okay,
This is true. And I'm loading
and
up
you'll
on
have Valium.
Valium.
I'm
And
like,
I'm
and you'll
loading
have
up on
Valium.
Valium too. So
Yeah. So I don't know. I say it's worth the watch. Not exactly a horror, in my opinion, but definitely. I mean, when you throw in reality and stuff like that, could be a little more horror filled than like it. But it's definitely dated, but
for me,
it's
it is.
interesting.
I thought it was well done. I thought it was not drive-in level movie, a little bit above that. But certainly B film. So it's your Saturday night. Ooh, I want to watch an old horror movie popcorn flick kind of deal.
Yeah.
That's my impression.
Yeah. It has
Well, I
Vincent Price.
guess
That's
Vincent Price. You
it. Vincent Price.
go.
That's it.
Makes almost anything worthwhile.
Oh,
Almost, except for Scream and Scream again.
If you say it, hence the almost.
yep,
But yeah.
yep.
But yeah, with that, read the story if you want, um, or don't if you want to save yourself whatever.
Read a synopsis online and save yourself some
Yes.
misogyny.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's I think a
cringe.
better suggestion.
There
But yeah,
are wonderful dystopian books that if you want to read them, go and read them. Fahrenheit 451, 1984,
Brave New
A
World.
Brave New World. Read those.
This was not my favorite post-apocalyptic literature for that,
I hesitate to call it literature.
based on just the who the author was, really.
Yeah.
At any rate,
There's
yeah.
there's better there. Find something else.
So, anyway,
Just watch the film. Just watch the film.
Yeah.
It's film.
It's not exactly the
I'll watch
story,
it.
but it's close enough to it. You get the gist of it.
Watch this and Night of the Living Dead, and together they make kind of the story that there was in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
There you go. And plus, you can see the blueprint that Romero was working off in action. So,
I mean,
so there you go.
absolutely. I will say, watching this, I can totally see where
Oh, big
there
time.
was where you would have pulled some from this to make Night of the Living Dead, having just watched that, literally just watched that. So it
I
makes sense.
also would say if you watch a Mega Man and follow it with the 1990s Stan series, you can see where whoever directed and did that, like I know King wrote it, but yeah, pulled from a Mega Man. A lot of the scenes with people being dead and falling out of their cars and stuff like that that you see in the 1990s Stan straight out of a Mega Man. So
Oh, that's fun and interesting. Hey,
See that.
there you go.
oh yeah.
With that, anything else, ladies?
No,
Nope.
I got
All
nothing.
right. Well, thanks for hanging in there with us. Watch the movie. It's fun. And I'm Jenny.
Rebecca.
I'm Betsy.
And this has been Girls Go Schools. Good night.
You have been listening to the Girls Go Schools podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Girls Go Schools Podcast, on Twitter at Girls Ghost Pod. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girls Go Schools Podcast, and find our podcast on your favorite podcatcher.